let's start with like, what is a peyote stitch end cap cover? Let me get something in frame here. All right, so here is a modular necklace. So this is the Rockstar. We featured these kits a couple weeks ago. And what you have here is there's a modular centerpiece, and then you have your beaded braid around the back, and we're joining the two sections with magnetic end caps, right? That's cool. That opens up so many possibilities for us. But we don't want to have just these naked end caps hanging out here. I mean, we could, that's fine, but this is so much better. Ta-da! Look at that. That's beautiful. So what I like to do with my modular necklaces is I often have a collection of end cap covers that I can swap out. So take a look. Here's one where my end cap covers are very matchy-matchy with my seed beads. And I like it. That's cool. That's beautiful. But I can totally change the look by swapping in this darker accent color, you know, and to make more of a frame around my focal piece. So you have different options. Now, of course, if you're not going to swap out your end caps, you may want to go ahead and just glue them on, because I will say this. You have to be careful taking your jewelry on and off if the end caps are not glued on, so that you don't lose them, because that would be a real bummer, right? So if you're going to glue them on, I would glue it onto the centerpiece. That way your centerpiece is, you know, complete. You have your centerpiece with your end cap cover, and then you can just swap this to your different braids. So when you're ready to glue, you're going to glue your end cap on the braid first, and then after this is dried is when I like to do it. Put your E6000 in here, just a little bit, right? We're not filling it up, obviously, just the inside here, maybe like a 1/4 inch in, just a very thin smear, and then pop that on, let it dry. So who here has done peyote stitch? Give me a heart if you have done peyote stitch, and give me a haha if you've never done peyote stitch before. I need to know what's happening here. What's the experience level with peyote stitch? So heart if you've done peyote stitch, and give me a haha if you've never done it before. I'm gonna set up my bead mat here. So I'm gonna get some beads on here. All right, I'm seeing a lot of hearts. I'm seeing some ha-has. So we got a mix here. Some of you have done peyote stitch, some of you haven't. That's excellent. I'm excited to have you guys all here. All right. So this is my little like starter piece. Let me start one from scratch, right? Because the trickiest part of peyote stitch is getting it started. I think that anyone who's done peyote stitch before will tell you that the beginning of it is fiddly. So I'm working with 1G thread here. This is my favorite beading thread. Also KO. They're basically the same exact thing. They just come in different colors. They're both made in Japan. They're really designed for bead stitching like this. It's pre-conditioned. You don't have to put any wax or thread conditioner on it. Now what I'm doing, you can't see it because I'm off camera. This isn't going to work very well on camera. I'm stretching the thread. I don't know if my mic is good enough to pick up that little like twang from me stretching the thread out. But you want to stretch your thread before you work with it. I did a nice like hand-to-hand full wingspan. All right, and I'm just going to thread my needle here. You can use whatever beading needle brings you joy. We put big eye needles in the kits because they're super versatile. You can use them for Kumihimo as well as the bead stitching. And if you are new to the world of bead stitching, it's easier to have that big eye needle to thread it. But if I'm just going to be doing a peyote stitch project, I always use a tulip needle. That's my favorite brand of needle. So I have my wingspan of thread. I'm going to take a nice tail, let's say 6 to 8 inches from the end. I'm going to wrap it around my index finger. You guys see that? This is important. This is how I'm going to control the tension. And then I hold a piece of thread with my thumb and middle finger. So I want this to go pretty fast. So I'm going to pick up 8 beads for this demo. That's how many beads you need for an end cap like this that splits in the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The technique on this is going to be the same no matter how many beads you have in the starting row. Just remember to make it an even number of beads, otherwise you have to do odd count peyote, which is just not worth it. So here are my 8 beads, and I'm going to let these slide down my thread, or rather I control them sliding down my thread. And now they're here, right where I'm going to be pinching them, my thumb and middle finger. So that's my 8 beads, that's my first row. I'm going to pick up 1 bead. Let's see. Whoa, I can zoom. All right. So you see this first bead here? The one, like the freest bead? We're gonna skip over it and we're gonna sew into the next one. You guys see that? And I'm gonna slide my new bead here. It's still on my needle. I slide it so it's on top of that bead I skipped over. It's hard to do so far away from my face. There you go, you can do it, Rebecca. And pinch it. I know, it'll be hard for you to see now that I've pinched it, but pinching is important. So I'm holding my new bead exactly where I want it on top of the bead I skipped. And haha, there you go. So you have this little like triangle. All right, I'll hold this where the camera will focus on it. Lower, there we go. So there's my little triangle of beads there. So I'm gonna hold that and do my next one. So I skip the next bead and I sew into the one after that. Again, I'm trying to hold all of this in my hands and stay in frame. That's the tricky part. Normally I do this kind of close to my face. I'm relatively nearsighted. So controlling my tension. See how it's starting to stack up there? Keep those beads there. All right, let's do it again. Pick up a bead, skip, go into the next one. Notice how I'm holding that new bead in place. I'm not letting it just free float. It's pinched between my fingers so it can't go anywhere. And then it just pulls into place. I have one more to complete this row. So I pick up a bead, skip the next bead, go into the very last bead here, push my bead into place, the new one, pull the needle through, pull the thread. Ta-da! There's the first 2 rows. I'm going to flip this over. I always flip my work while I'm doing this. I like to bead away from myself. Like I said, I'm nearsighted, so I need to keep the work near me, and it doesn't really work so well for me to sometimes work like away and then turn around and come back. That's super awkward, so I just flip the piece over. So I'm always going the same direction. So I stick the needle in where I need to go, hold that bead in place, and then pull everything through. All right, so let's take a look at this. We're halfway through this row. So you can see we have a series of up and down beads. So the new bead that I'm going to pick up, it's going to go into this hole right here, and I'm going to sew into the up bead. A lot of beginning beaders, they'll actually have their beadwork on their mat like this, and they try to sew, and that's where things get all flipped around. You got to make sure that you're holding it in your hand to control it. So put your needle into that up bead, slide the new bead into the hole where it goes, pinch it, pull the thread through. Whoops, stay in frame, Rebecca. You can do it. Pick up the bead, sew through that up bead, scooch the bead into the little hole it's going to fill, pinch it, pull the thread through. All right, so that's how you get it started. We're going to do a little like time lapse here. I'll put the thread back on the one that I already got going a few rows. So da 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 da. Look how quickly that grew. Yeah, so I have a comment here from Randy. I noticed you didn't use a bead stopper. Instead, you allowed the first row to float in your hand. That's exactly right, and that it's a matter of personal preference. My spouse Richard is a big bead stopper person. They're always using bead stoppers when they do their stitching. I'm more of on peyote stitch for sure. I really like to just wrap that thread around my finger and hold it tight that way. Once you do the first 2 rows, you really don't need a bead stopper at all beyond that point. But it's really just whatever works for you. One thing that kind of annoys me about using a bead stopper on peyote stitch is I have to be really careful to not catch my thread on the springs or on those little ears of the bead stopper. I know some people also use a stop bead. A stop bead is just any other bead, usually one that's not part of your project, and you sew through it twice, and they use that to create tension. But again, I find that I get the best tension by wrapping the thread around my finger. Let's see. Jim says, before sewing the first individual bead, I use a collapsible needle and run a thread through the bottom of alternate beads on the first row. That throws them up into the up and down. It keeps me from sewing into the bottom row in accident. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense, Jim. Yeah, it's all about just finding what works for you. For me, the trick to not sewing into the wrong row by accident when you're starting is just keeping everything really tight in your hand and not allowing it to spin around. Because when you spin around, that's when you sometimes sew into the wrong layer. And on something that's solid color like this, it actually won't be a deal breaker. Honestly, you can still make that work. But of course, if you're doing a pattern of some sort, it's a real problem if your first row gets twisted around. How many rows do you do? Well, that's a great question. Patty wants to know how many rows do we do. It depends on how big your Endcap cover needs to be. So if you're working with a pattern in my book or you have the kit, then it will tell you how many rows. It'll say, pick up this many beads to start and then keep going until it's this many beads long. If you aren't working from a kit, you'll just need to measure. All right, so here's an end cap. If I want to go around this one and I don't know how many rows, I hold my beadwork underneath it. I'm like, oh, well, that's totally not enough yet. I got to keep going. And I'm going to just measure every now and again until it's long enough that the 2 ends are going to meet. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Arliss. So on this particular one, I'll probably do 16. That's how many fits on my stainless steel magnets, the 6mm ones. The bigger one, like this here, this is an 8mm. That one needs, I think, 20 rows off the top of my head. If you look in the book, in the Peyote Stitch Endcap section, there's a chart with a few different sizes. But of course, end caps vary, right? That's what you have to keep in mind. End caps vary. So how do you know how many beads to pick up in that first row? What you need to do is look at the end cap. And the first question is, am I making a tube that's going to slide over the entire end cap? Or am I making a two-part end cap like this one? So that's a decision you're making. So let's say we're going to make a tube to slide over this. I need to just pick up beads. Again, this is assuming that I'm not working with a pattern or kit or something. This is my end cap from my stash. I want to make a cover for it. How many beads do I need? Well, I'm just going to start picking up beads on my needle and holding them against the end cap until it's long enough to be equal in width to my end cap while still being an even number. Yes, you could do this in odd count, Peyote. I cannot be bothered. So let's see. I'm a little bit over. Let me count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 17. Whoop. Well, what do you know? 16 is what I write for these patterns. So there's my 16 beads wide. So if your end cap is wider or narrower or whatever, you just, for your initial row, pick up beads on your needle, hold it up against your end cap, and figure out that width. And then, again, for figuring out how many rows, you're just going to keep on stitching until it's long enough to wrap around. Now in my alchemy necklace here, this one has a little bit of a pattern to it. So again, that's just determined in your first row. You know, I just picked up, you know, the green beads along the edge, and then once I got it established, you just look at what beads you're sitting on top of and make sure you pick up an appropriately colored bead. You can also, if you need to, you can sketch it out on a piece of paper. Remember that in Peyote Stitch, the beads sit offset, like up and down like a brick wall. They're not straight on top of each other like on graph paper. And for those of you who are new to our show, typically we're selling stuff during one of these shows. I do have a kit to show you at the end of my demo. I have a couple of one style of kit, but I think I have 6 kits available. But I wanted to show you guys how to do Peyote Stitch because it's such an important skill. I mean, for beading in general, but it's so awesome to be able to do this with Kumihimo, right? Because it just opens up so many design possibilities. 1, it lets you do all these different modular designs. 2, it lets you really customize the color of your end cap. How many times have you made a piece and you're looking for an end cap and you can't find something that's just the right color, right? That's so annoying. What would happen if you only made one cover the length of both caps? So Kathleen, that's what we do in our modular pieces. We make one cover, this brown piece, is as long as both pieces there. And if I wanted this to be permanently attached, I would glue it on this side. Or, you know, glue it to this magnet so that then this side is still free, because one side has to be free, otherwise you just glued the necklace shut. And that'd be a real bummer. But yeah, so you can make them where they're two separate end caps like this, where there's a split in the middle, or you can make it where it's a sleeve. And get in frame. So this is the opening night bracelet in my new book. Roll my wrist over. Look at that monster end cap cover on there. You can't see the individual beads very well because it's black, so it's overexposing, but whoops, I just flung beads everywhere. So this is a double. So the instructions for this are in the book, but by using this peyote stitch end cap technique, you're able to make your own custom end caps for braids that are multiple braids wide. There's a necklace in the book called Water Lilies that's actually 5 braids wide, and again, everything is held together. I mean, it's sewn together, but the end caps are held together with a peyote stitch cover, and it's just a matter of making it longer so it will go all the way around your magnets. Oh, yay, Randy, your book came today. Awesome. Yeah, so take a look at this. So here's, if I can get this nicely in frame. You guys see like the up, down of the beads there? So once you get going, all you're doing is you're putting a new bead in every down bead spot, and you sew through the up beads. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this is kind of slow. Yeah, it is. I'm faster at it when I'm by myself, but not a lot faster. It's slow going. Wendy, where can you find the base magnetic end caps? So here's the deal with the end caps. So we will get the end caps on the website as soon as I have a stable supply of them. Right now, I don't know where you can get them retail, and I'm really sorry. But the pandemic has really disrupted supply chains. Generally speaking, stainless steel jewelry findings are made in China. So, as you know, manufacturing has been disrupted in China due to the pandemic. So things that used to just take like a couple weeks are now taking significantly longer than they used to. So right now, basically, as soon as we get the magnets in, they're going into kits and they're selling out before I can have enough to put on the website. But we are hoping that in the next few weeks and months, the supply chain will stabilize and we'll again have enough end caps to put on the website. If you're searching at other online bead stores, you're just searching for 6mm or 8mm, depending on which size you need, stainless steel magnetic end cap. Let's see. Will you be making a kit for the alchemy? Yes, I sure will. Do I know when? After vacation. When after vacation? That's a surprise, but it'll be after vacation. All right, cool. So let me keep going on this thing. So I think that, what was I saying? Oh, I was saying that this is slow going, and it is slow going. And I wanted to ask you, do you guys ever do 2-drop peyote stitch? Have you guys heard of that? Do you know what that is? 2-drop peyote stitch or double drop peyote stitch, fast peyote. Oops, I just caught it on a bead. Have you guys done that? All right, I'm gonna show you something. Let me just finish this row. So this is double drop peyote stitch. You guys see that? Hold on. Is it possible to have a cover slider bead like for 2 side-by-side strands, but cap off the end of only one? Hold on, I'm trying to follow. Is it possible to have a slider like bead for 2 side-by-side strands? Yes. But cap off only one end. Yeah, definitely. When for the Virtuoso necklace? Virtuoso necklace will also be after we come back from vacation. Okay. I'll go ahead and tell you. I'm not telling you the exact dates, but I will tell you something really exciting. We just got a unicorn trunk show in. I don't know what that song was. I'm sorry. We just got a unicorn trunk show in. There we go. I think that was the sound I was going for the first time. We just got our unicorn trunk show in, so we'll be counting our beads this week, and we'll be doing something with unicorn beads on Friday, and then on Tuesday, which will be our last show before we go on vacation, and then there'll be more unicorn when we come back from vacation too. So, yeah. All right, so 2-drop peyote stitch. Let's see, Pat says, very cool, very fun, loves it. Kristen's heard of it, Carol, no. Jim hasn't heard of it. Michelle didn't do so well with it. All right, so let's talk about 2-drop peyote stitch. So take a look at the Endcap covers here on my Pearl Diver necklace. Can you see how the beads are staggered in groups of 2 instead of in single bead units? So what you do for 2-drop peyote stitch is you're going to pick up the same number of beads in your first row, but from there on out, you're going to treat your 2 beads like they're 1 bead. I will show you. I think that's the best way to do this. Let me get that necklace out of the way. All right, I can use the same piece of thread. So double drop peyote. I've started doing this recently because my dear spouse, Richard, was sitting on the sofa one night making a peyote stitch cover for me for one of the kits for the sample. And he's like, hey, I just made this single drop peyote, but is there any reason why this can't be double drop? I'm like, other than the fact that I need the second end cap cover to match the first, no, there's no reason. Here on out, let's do some of these double drops. So they suggested it, and I tried it, and yeah, I don't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier. So let's see if I can count here. Here, let me not make one quite so wide. 8. Okay. I think I got 8 beads on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so there's my 8 beads. I'm going to wind the thread onto my finger, slide these beads down. Okay, so this is gonna start just like before, right? I got my beads controlled here. But now I'm gonna pick up 2 beads, because from here on out, 2 beads equal 1 bead. So I have 2 beads on my needle, and I'm gonna skip the first 2 beads. And I'm trying to hold this so that you can see it, but really I gotta pinch it. So into the next 2 beads. Same trick as before, put your new beads where you can pinch them, and then pull. Now it's gonna want to be a little bit more fiddly because they're 2 beads, but just pull pull it tightly. All right, let's do it again. Pick up 2 more beads. Skip 2 beads. Go into 2 beads. Get in frame. Ta-da! You guys see it? How it's stacking up? So let's flip it over, because I always flip it at the end of the row. Pick up 2 beads. Sew through the next 2 up beads, because remember, from here on out, we're just treating 2 beads like they're 1 bead. Let's get another 2 beads on here so it's gonna quit flipping around. Pick up 2 beads, sew through the 2 up beads. Ta-da! All right. Yeah, so you just keep doing the same thing. Treating your 2 beads like they're 1 bead. And it goes ever so slightly faster. Actually, it goes a lot faster once you get going on it. Get that. Get in frame. There we go. See? Look how quick that is. Nope, double drop's not in the book. Facebook Live bonus. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Let me get back to this main piece. So how do we know when it's long enough? When it wraps around our end cap, or until you've reached as many rows as your pattern calls for. So you can see I'm not quite there. Almost though, let me put my needle back on. Oh, Pat says all 5 of my dogs are watching you tonight. Adorable. Are they beading along? All right, this is almost long enough. So for this particular end cap, I'm going for 16 rows. We might cut it short for the demo. We'll see. We'll see if we can power through. Speed beading. Yeah, the double drop's not in the book, but there's nothing more to it. Just you pick up the same number of beads in the starting row, but then when you go to your next row, you pick up the beads 2 at a time and sew through the beads 2 at a time. So what's going to happen at the end of this is we're going to zip the 2 ends together. Oops, there you go. Sorry, stay in frame. So I'm looking at the end of my piece here. Let me see if we can, hold on, get some room. Okay. So here's my little piece. Wow. All right. So you guys see how on this end, these little sticky outy beads line up with the sticky inny beads on the other side. All right, we got our up beads over here. And then at the other end of the row, there are the down beads. This isn't long enough to be what I actually would do, but I'm going to go ahead and zip this together anyway. One thing you'll want to do to double check your work is to count the number of beads on both sides of the piece. So if your project said, you know, do 16 rows, you count the beads along the edge. You'd want to have 16 over here and 16 over here. I know I don't have 16 because I'm doing it shorter. I got 12. Let's see if I have 12 on the other side. Yep, I got 12 on the other side. So that means that I can zip this up. So the general concept here is we're making a tube and we're going to interlace the beads and sew them together. All right, like this, we're making a little tube. But when we go to sew it, I'm actually going to pinch it flat like it's a taco. I think it might be like slightly too much zoomed once I have my hand in the picture. There we go. So here's my peyote stitch taco. All right, so I have the two ends folded together. I'm coming out over here, and all I want to do is I want to sew into this up bead on the other side. As always, pinch everything nice and tight. Then I'm going to sew into the up bead on the other side. So it's like we're interlacing the teeth of a zipper. Go through the next up bead on the other side. So I'm just going back and forth. So I'm on the right side with this bead, and now I'm going to sew through the next up bead on the left side. So up bead on the right side. Up bead on the left side. Okay, one more over here, up bead on the right side. Up bead on the left side. Now when you're at the end like this, you want to make sure that your tail doesn't loosen up. Make sure you pull everything nice and tight. So I have now sewed the ends together. But now I'm going to flip it around and go back the other way to reinforce my thread path. So I just go into the bead on the other side. And we're just kind of hopscotching back and forth. So we just want to hit these up beads. So just back and forth, one on one side, one on the other side. You see the little like zigzag of up beads, that's what we're hitting. Guys, I am on full screen. I can see that you guys keep saying full screen. I'm gonna assume that you are not synced with what I am because I've been on full screen for many minutes now. Yeah. Richard said they call it the zipper. This is the zipper. Zip it up. So you make your peyote stitch strip and then you zip it up. Okay, I'm at the end. The end. Ta-da! I got a little tube. So now what? Well, this little dinky thing is not for a 6mm end cap. This looks like it would fit on probably a 4mm. But how do we finish off our threads? All right, what do we do about these two threads? There's one at the beginning, there's one at the end. We got to do something about them. So if you do bead stitching, you're probably familiar with half hitch knots. That's where you sew into your beadwork, you catch your working thread under an existing thread path, and then sew through the loop that makes. You could do that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just finish off my thread by sewing through here in like a little zigzaggy pattern. All right, so you look at it, your beads are like the spots of a checkerboard. So I'm gonna sew like in a diagonal line, and then go over, skip a row, come back down, and then go diagonal the other way. I'll do that with each one of my threads, and then cut it off. So, whoops, gotta like unzoom. Once you get my hand in there, then I gotta like really unzoom, otherwise it freaks out. Okay, so I'm just gonna sew in here. So I'm just moving along diagonal line. If I stay in frame. Get my tube of beads out of the way. Pro tip when doing bead stitching: try to minimize the amount of miscellaneous debris that's hanging out on your bead board, because it's just stuff for you to catch your thread on. So like all the stuff that's hanging out here, my scissors, my ruler, these 50,000 necklaces, the tube of beads, you ideally should clear all of that away and just have your little mat with your seed beads. Okay, so I've moved up along on the diagonal. Now to do my turnaround, I'm going to sew into the bead right next to where I am. I'm gonna go down there. Just gonna use my fingernail to sort of like push the beads down so that I only sew through one bead and don't accidentally sew through two, because that would be bad. And then I can turn around, and now I'm going diagonally the other direction. And by making little loops and figure eights and stuff in your beadwork, you've essentially tied a knot. This works with delica beads because the delicas just snap together, or any of the other cylinder beads, right? So if you have icos or treasures or anything like that, this trick will work. If you're working with round seed beads, like just a regular Toho or Miyuki round, then you would want to tie an actual knot because it could slide apart. But the delicas, they snap together so beautifully that we can do this trick. And once you're done with a thread on one side, you just cut it off. Richard likes to use a thread zapper, and that's cool. I'm more of a scissor person for a project like this. And then you just do the same thing on the other side. What size seed beads are these? These are size 11 delicas. Yeah, so let me go back to, I have a question about the 2-drop. So yeah, 2-drop peyote is the same number of beads at the beginning, because remember we're basing it on the width of our desired end cap cover. So you're going to pick up the same number of beads to start. Let me set this down. There you go. So it's the same number of beads. So this is 8 beads across, just like this guy here. They're the same width there. And then when I go to pick up beads, that very first time I'm picking up beads after the initial row, I pick them up 2 at a time rather than 1 at a time. And I sew through the beads 2 at a time. And that will set you up on your 2 bead pattern. And from here on out, you just pick up 2 beads and you sew through the 2 up beads. Oh, haha, this needle is not attached to this project. That was funny. Ah, with the big eye needle, yeah, you have to be careful if you're using a big eye needle because it is pointy at both ends. That is a hazard. If you're a big eye needle aficionado, you might consider a thimble. The tulip needles are rounded at the other end. I mean, it still hurts if you like jam it into yourself, but you can't actually fully stab yourself with it, which is great because I hate stabbing myself. Yeah, so here's my 2-drop peyote stitch. Just 2 at a time there. All right, let's talk about gluing, shall we? Let's get some of these guys out of the way. All right, so here, zoom out. All right, that's as zoomed out as we go. So here's a bracelet I have, and I have my 2 peyote stitch end cap covers, but they are not glued on yet. So I'm going to use E6000 to glue my covers on. I'm just getting my beads out of the way so that I don't glue beads in here or make some sort of mess. Okay, should have brought a bead scoop. Wasn't prepared. All right, so this is my Trinity bracelet. Just get my magnets on there. So that's my Trinity bracelet. And I want to put these end cap covers on here. So I'm going to use E6000 to do that. So here's my E6000. These end caps have been glued on and dried completely. That's how I like to do it. I do it as a full 2-step process. So I glue on the end cap, let it wait 24 hours, then come back to glue on the cover. So here are my important tools. I have my scrap paper. The scrap paper protects my work surface. And I've got my toothpick. The toothpick is so that we can be neat and tidy about this. Some people, when they're gluing on their end caps, they just squeeze the glue directly into the end cap. I cannot handle that. I think that that's too messy, that you're going to get glue everywhere. I always use a toothpick. So, anyway, toothpicks are extremely important. If you have the kind with like a fun umbrella on the end, that probably works even better. Or some of them have like the little like tassel or the sword. That would be great, but I just have these like boring ones, so we'll have to just imagine. So here's my end cap cover. Here's my end cap. Just like when we're gluing our end cap to the braid, the glue goes inside the concave thing. That's always our concept when gluing. If you got an innie and an outie, the glue goes on the innie, in the innie. So I'm going to take a little smear of E6000. Can we see that? Just a little bit. It looks bigger than it is because there's a bubble in it. Just a little smear. One small blob. Frame of reference. This is probably 4 to 5 millimeters in diameter, this blob. It's not very big at all. So I'm going to stick that into my peyote cover and smear it around, smear it around, smear it around, smear it around. I'm trying to get it all the way around. Smear it around, smear it around. More smearing. Great. But when I was smearing, my toothpick was only halfway into the end cap. I'm not trying to smear it all the way to the end because the end cap itself is going to push the glue when I do this. So stick this in here. Push, 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 push. All right, look, I got glue on the end. That's okay, but you do have to address it. It means I use too much glue. Always use less glue than you think. So, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna push this against a piece of paper. Now this is like soft, so let me get like an actual hard surface. You want to push this down and make sure that your end cap is flush with the magnet, because if your cover is coming past your magnet at all, then your magnet's not going to close. Next, I'm going to take a clean toothpick and I'm going to look at the other end to see if there's any glue oozing out. I do not see any glue ooze, so that's fine. I'm just going to do another little like rub here that's going to get off any excess glue at the end. All right, cool. Let that sit over there. And oh good, I did bring a second piece of scrap paper. So you do the same exact thing on the other side, but this time, since I did get a smidge too much glue, I'm gonna try to make a smaller blob. Smaller blob, there we go. This time I only have like a 4 millimeter blob. There we go, smear it around, get that in there. Okay, same thing as before. Just stick that on. Okay, once again, there's some glue coming out the end. No biggie, just make sure to take it off. One thing I love about E6000, it doesn't bond to skin. It is not super glue. I hate super glue so much. Insert your favorite expletive. I hate super glue so much. So I'm just pushing this down here. The E6000, if you get any of it on your finger, it's not going to glue you. You're not going to become permanently attached to your braid. Your fingers won't get glued together. You can just rub your fingers together and it balls up like rubber cement. So good, I got all the glue off of there. Now I'm going to check back here. I don't see any ooze. So this is done, except for the hard part. Waiting. We gotta wait. This Trinity bracelet has to dry before we can play with it anymore. Now, if you live in a place where there are other people or animals or something that might want to play with your project, you might consider taping this down. I tape it down just so that I can remember when it's going to be dry. So I'll like take some blue tape, whoop, whoop, tape it down right on the blue tape, and see it's just about 6 o'clock. I'll say, ready to wear 6 p.m. on 6/24. That way I know that we're good to go. But let me just set this over here. We've been on a long time. Peyote stitches takes a long time. So let me show you the confetti